story of Newcastle United is an emotional one. For every triumph, the fans have had to suffer at least their share of despair. But always there has been the passion for the game. Few clubs have prompted such adulation from their followers. No supporters cherish their heroes more. It's an action-packed story of a club where life is never, never dull. Newcastle United. The trophy cabinet at St James Park proudly displays just some of the souvenirs from nearly a century of professional football on Tyneside. In its time, the Newcastle United sideboard has played host to 4 league championships, 6 FA Cups and a European trophy too. But the silverware can only tell part of a soccer story that began back in the 1890s. The Victorian Newcastle of coal and heavy engineering. The city's elegant centre separated 2 football clubs, Newcastle East End and West End. In 1892 they merged to give the busy port a single team, Newcastle United. If the Tyne Bridge was to symbolise the city through so much of the 20th century, the early football teams set a standard the changing years would find hard to maintain. In the early 1900s, Newcastle had more trophies than bridges. In a 7-year period, United were crowned champions 3 times and reached 7 FA Cup finals. This was their first league title-winning side in 1905. It had been the goals of Jock Peddy that brought Newcastle out of the second division 7 years earlier. Peddy was the first of the great number 9s. Sadly, he was also the first of many terrace heroes to leave the club. Players like Colin Veitch, an accomplished scholar and musician, helped United dominate the Edwardian era. Jock Rutherford's pace and control accounted for many of United's important goals in this golden age. And there was Bill McCracken, a brilliant Irish fullback with a superb tactical mind. McCracken was so successful at playing the offside game, the league would eventually change the offside laws because of him. Those league titles may have established Newcastle as the country's leading side, but it was the FA Cup that caught the imagination of the Tyneside public. 3 times thousands flocked south to the Crystal Palace, only to see their beloved Newcastle lose in the final. But in 1910, United finally broke that duck at the 4th attempt. Second Division Barnsley were the opposition, and although the Yorkshiremen held out for a 0-0 draw at the Palace, 2 goals from Albert Shepherd in the replay at Goodison Park brought the cup back to Tyneside for the first time. But 1920 saw a left winger return to his native north-east from Scottish club Morton. His name was Stan Seymour, and he would go on to become manager and chairman of the club. It was the start of his family's 70-year association with Newcastle United. In 1924, Newcastle's love affair with the FA Cup was to resume in a new setting, Wembley, against Aston Villa. It was the new stadium's first ever all-ticket match. Harrison Seymour scored the goals as the Geordies gained revenge for their cup final defeat by Villa 19 years earlier. One key signing converted cup winners into league champions. Hughie Gallagher became Newcastle's record buy in December 1925. He was among the very greatest of number 9s. 2 years after Gallagher's departure, Newcastle found themselves back at Wembley for their 7th FA Cup final. Mighty Arsenal were the opponents for a clash that would be remembered for one of the most controversial goals in Cup history. But within 2 years, the celebrations turned to mourning as United were relegated for the first time. If only Andy Cunningham had been the last manager to take them down. During a gloomy 14-year absence from the top flight, Albert Stubbins, a native Geordie brought up in the United States, continued the tradition of charismatic number 9s. Sadly, his best years were lost to the war, but Stubbins hit 231 goals in 187 wartime games. Len Shackleton will forever be remembered for his exploits with deadly rival Sunderland. But the Clown Prince of Soccer was the darling of the Gallagher from the day of his debut when Shack scored 6 times in United's 13-0 hammering of Newport. Stan Seymour was now rebuilding. Gritty Scottish centre-half Frank Brennan was bought to partner Yorkshireman Joe Harvey, signed from Bradford City just after the war. And a young centre-forward from Ashington was making his name in those second division days. John Edward Thompson Milburn was to be known all over the football world, quite simply, as War Jackie. His 20 goals for George Martin's team helped win promotion behind Birmingham City. Newcastle averaged nearly 57,000 for their home games in that promotion season of 1948, making them the best supported club in the land in spite of their second division status. And for Milburn and those ever fanatical supporters, that was just a taste of glories to come. 1951 saw Newcastle return to Wembley after a 19-year absence to take on the artists from Blackpool. The great Stanley Matthews was the creative force behind that team, but United had assembled a mighty side themselves. More importantly, fate decreed it was to be United and War Jackie's year.
Robledo gets possession. Blackpool hesitated, expecting an offside decision, and Jackie Milburn's away on his own, a beautiful solo effort. So far, the Royal Party had seen rather disappointing football. Surrounded, back heels to Milburn, who beat Farm from about 25 yards. Things look black indeed for the pool. And now for the presentation of the cup.
12 months later, Newcastle were back again. The opposition and outcome had a familiar ring. 20 years earlier, it had taken a hotly disputed goal for Newcastle to beat Arsenal. In 1952, Joe Harvey's team needed another stroke of luck to lift the cup.
The Tynesiders now started foraging for goals. Jackie Milburn led the attack, but Joe Mercer, number 6, was always on the spot. Still, soon afterwards, he sent it to George Robledo, who headed the goal of the match. Mr. Churchill was there to present the cup, and he presented it.
Well, I'm very proud indeed to be taking this cup back to Tyneside for the second time in 2 years.
Although Harvey didn't realise it at the time, 2 desperately barren seasons were to follow. By the 54-55 season, the United lineup had been given a new lease of life. Harvey had handed the captaincy to Scottish international Jimmy Schooler. There was Yorkshire miner Len White, perhaps one of the greatest players never to win an England cap. And at half-back, a man for the later pages of cup history with Sunderland, Bob Stokoe.
You have no idea, Roger, how much opposition there was for a particular place. That's the big thing that has changed now. You come to a club like Newcastle, there would be at least 4 for one position, where now sometimes if you get an injury, you haven't got a player to fill it, where in them days there were a queue. The maximum wage was on, we were all on the same sort of money. I think there was probably more of a team spirit because of that. Nobody was getting anything. We used to go away a lot, travelling for special training, particularly during the cup runs, and it became always that little bit more of a family. I mean, from, 1940, the end of 48 season to 1955, we were actually without a manager. But there was that many good players that anybody could have picked the team in them particular days, because if somebody got injured, there was a choice of another 2 or 3. So that was why our situation was different, and I don't think it will ever happen again.
And Don Revie kicks off.
United reached their 10th cup final that season. The opposition, Manchester City, and their legendary German goalkeeper, Bert Trautmann.
Len White took the kick, a beauty, and Jack Milburn headed through. Yes, Newcastle were 1 up with a goal in less than a minute. That was sensation number 1. Bert Trautmann, once a German prisoner of war in Britain, had a vitally important job defending the city's goal. He rose to the occasion magnificently. It was from one of these raids that a high centre from Hayes was headed in by Bobby Johnston for the equaliser. Because Newcastle was soon right on top. In less than 10 minutes, Bobby Mitchell took a very nice pass and beat Trautmann from a sharp angle. The unlucky Meadows was watching it again, and all the the time they looked like going further ahead. Mitchell played a big part in Newcastle's third goal, driving down the wing and making a perfect opening. George Hannah did the rest.
The drive to their football ground.
It was hard to believe as School had brought the cup back to a delirious Tyneside that this was the last domestic trophy a Newcastle captain would collect. But for those supporters, their team was the pride of England, with the country's greatest centre-forward.
Jackie has his own way of replying before Scholar speaks.
Jackie Milburn had started on the wing, but Charlie Wayman's departure to Southampton in 1947 made way for Jackie to move to number 9. Milburn bagged a hat-trick on his debut. Lightning quick with a lethal shot in either foot, Jackie specialised in the spectacular. A legend was born.
There's a lot of Geordies that sort of had the word war put in front, you know, and he became war Jackie after the war, really, didn't he, and in the 50s, because of the way he used to excite people. And there's a lot of things changed, but the way he scored goals and his movement on the field and the way that he got the crowd and that behind him. I mean, I've seen a lot of good goal scorers, and I may be biased in some ways, but I still believe I haven't seen anybody, whether it be World Cups or whatever, that has thrilled me to watch as much as what Jackie did at that particular time, whatever the conditions, when we played on snow or in heavy going or whatever it is. During that particular period, he was something really special.
In the barren late 50s, it was left to individuals like George Eastham, a graceful inside right to keep the crowds entertained. Ivor Allchurch gave United more moments to cherish than most in a career that brought the club into the 60s. It took perhaps Tyneside's favourite adopted Geordie to rekindle the blazing triumphs of the previous decade. Yorkshireman Joe Harvey, the victorious Wembley captain, came back in June 1962 to become manager and a permanent fixture at St James Park. But the first job of the former Workington boss was to build a team to regain First Division status. By his third season, Harvey had shrewdly assembled a promotion squad. The balding head of Jim Eiley, a £17,000 buy from Nottingham Forest, was to provide much of a revived United's sense of purpose.
Has scored Jim Eiley.
The ex-England wing half Stan Anderson was stolen from arch-rival Sunderland.
A magnificent goal. Well, Taylor with the corner, and what a tremendous goal from Stan Anderson. Well, my goodness, there it is.
Ron McGarry, a bustling centre-forward from Bolton, was to prove another colourful wearer of the number 9 shirt.
Just inches wide, a good effort by McGarry. To McGarry. And there it is, the third goal.
There was young local talent too. Alan Suddick had been one of the club's youngest debutants at 17 years and 158 days.
Pushing it through for Suddick. And what a glorious goal. Glorious goal by Alan Suddick. Took his time there.
And a teenager, then known more formally as Brian Robson, was in the early stages of accumulating a double century of league goals.
The ball down. Playing his usual immaculate game for Newcastle this afternoon. Teeing the ball up for the other players. Slipping it through for Robson. And what a beautiful goal. Well,
sure, it was obviously very difficult for me at times as a young player and as a pretty quiet lad. He was very strong, but yeah, I admired him tremendously, you know, because of his own achievements and the stories that you were told about his success. And obviously it was Newcastle. Joe Harvey was linked with Newcastle United. But I got in early when he first came, so I came as a young player. And so I was one of the few young players that he brought in. So he always gave me a chance. But Stan Anderson pushed me a lot at that time, Jimmy Greenoff, who were wanting younger players to come through and break through and obviously be ready to try and get experience before they went in the First Division. But he had a great sense of humour, you know, you were frightened of him though. I mean, you had that fear and obviously the respect.
Newcastle marched back to the top flight after a 4-year exile. But there were to be few celebrations over the next 2 seasons as Newcastle fought successive, but ultimately successful, relegation campaigns. But Harvey's transfer market skills had by no means deserted him. He paid a club record £80,000 for Welsh centre-forward Wyn Davies, who was to form an increasingly dangerous partnership with the maturing Pop Robson.
Good play by Wyn Davies. And there's the second, it is! Brian Robson's second goal. Look at his smiling face. Now Robson with a kick. Brian Robson, it's a good one. They're all in there. Davis, and it's there. Wyn Davis has scored.
Wyn played particularly well at that time, and probably I would think at the best stage of his career, and I fed off him, and I got a lot of success through it. I got about 55 goals in 2 seasons, 31 season, 25 the next, and had a bad season when I scored 9.
My goodness me! There's Tommy Gibb, Davis, and Gibb, beautiful running by Gibb. And there it is! There it is! Brian Robson has scored! What a goal! What a goal! That's as fine an example as we can possibly show you. Just a half slip, and now here's Scott for Newcastle. And Robson! And there it is!
In 1968, despite finishing a modest 10th, Newcastle were to set off on a football adventure that made headlines well beyond Tyneside. It started with a spectacular 4-0 win against the powerful Dutch side Feyenoord. It was their first taste of a very different cup experience, the European Fairs Cup.
We didn't really realise what we're doing then. We were actually making history for Newcastle United. But again, it was like almost like playing in the Anglo-Italian Cup at the time. It was the same sort of feeling about it. We didn't think it was that, at least I didn't think it was that important to the people. Having said that, must have been a bit naive as well, because there was 50-odd thousand people turning up every home game. And I remember the first game against Feyenoord, I think it was the Geordies' way of saying, right, we're now going at the big time, we're going to support you to the hilt, which of course they did, because I don't think there's ever been a team who got into Europe got such an immediate reaction from the fans as we did at Newcastle.
Those fans positively revelled in the novelty of continental football. They travelled to Rotterdam for the second leg, confident they could sit back and enjoy the scenery. But United were about to undergo their first lesson in the European game. They needed that 4-goal cushion as the Dutch showed their true worth. Newcastle were pleased to escape with a 2-goal defeat, but the bandwagon was rolling. And as their own chairman said, Newcastle were daft enough to go and win it. Sporting Lisbon were disposed of by a single goal at St James after a 1-1 draw in Portugal. The goals flowed in the third round against the Spaniards from Real Zaragoza. It proved to be the 2 United scored in the first leg that were crucial. A 2-1 win at St James meant 8 were shared, but the away goals rule saw the Magpies fly on.
The atmosphere and incidents that happened, when you remember, I think it was Sporting Lisbon, just about 5 o'clock there was a snowfall, and there was about 2 or 3 inches, and I mean they hadn't seen snow. They came on the pitch and they had stockings rolled on their hands. I mean they were frozen, and I mean I think we ended up winning that game. Just incidents like that, and obviously 55,000, 60,000 people in here. It just, the whole stadium took off. I think I scored a goal after about, I think it was my first touch of the ball after about 2 minutes. The players just lifted, and it's fantastic, fantastic atmosphere.
Actually, it was another Portuguese side, Vitória Setúbal, who slid to a 5-1 defeat. But no mistake about the young Robson's 2 goals. The semi-final against Glasgow Rangers will always be remembered for the hordes who invaded the pitch when Newcastle went 2 up in the second leg. But they couldn't stop United marching into the final. 60,000 crammed into St James for an unforgettable first leg against the Hungarians, Újpest Dósa.
Gibb with the kick. Wyn Davis got a real chance. And it's there! A goal! Kerr again for Newcastle. Keeping this defence under pressure all the time. And Kerr has a goal! His second goal! Aaron Toft. Scott still going. It's a goal and a good one. Jim Scott, the scorer.
And we go over there and we're playing. It was nice. It was a balmy night, and just to warm up, which you had to do, you had to go out and warm up for 15 minutes. Then you're allowed to come back in, and you all went out together again. Well, we had warmed up first. Joe had been watching the opposition warm up, and he came in the middle of the dressing room just before. He says, "Hey, these lads don't have to look red hot." What? He says, "They're knocking 50, 60-yard passes straight to feet." He says, "And they're sharp, very, very sharp. We've got a problem here." And we were sat there 3-0 up. That was Joe. We went out, and sure enough, as the story goes, we got well hammered in the first half, and it could have been 4 or 5-0 at half time. Anyway, when we come in, eventually we get in at half time, and Joe's not to be seen because he's had to make his way from the box, or at least the stand. Eventually comes in, by which time we are sat in the dressing room, and I'll never forget the sweat was just dripping on the floor. Our heads were bowed. It was then, we were still leading, what, 3-2, wasn't it? And Joe came in, eventually, smoking his cigarette, charges through the door, and we were all sat heads down, and I said to Frank Clark, if ever we needed a bit of help from the gaffer, now is the hour. Joe came in, his first words, what's the matter? Well, what's that effect? And there was silence, and I said, well, Gaffer, I don't know if you noticed, but for the first half we've been destroyed. It could have been 6 apart from Willie McFall from the blinder, and the crossbar and the post, it could have been 6. He says, no problem. He says, all you got to do is score a goal. Again, silence, and again I spoke up and I said, you have been watching the game, haven't you? We haven't been over the halfway line. And he said, never mind all that, he says, all you got to do is go out and score a goal. Well, as history would have it, we go out and we score, and he says, because these foreigners, they'll collapse like a pack of cards. He said, they're all the same, foreigners, got no gumption. Sure enough, we go out and score, and of course, what happens? They do collapse like a pack of cards. We eventually get in after winning the cup, quite easily as it turned out. And we get in, and Joe's missing again. The time we've got the cup in the dressing room, Joe makes his way back down, walks in with a big cigarette again. He says, I told you, no problem.
And so in this opening minute of the second half, Bobby Monker has gone onto the line. There's the cross. Davis is there, and it's blocked away. Comes back to Sinter again. Monker, and Monker scored. That's Monker again. Fantastic. Rather slippery, I would say. Come out to Scott. Scott with a chance. Scott with a shot. Ben Aronsoft is a goal. A lovely goal. Newcastle have equalised. What a great shot by Ben Aronsoft. Davis winning that one in the air, and Foggon going through the centre. Foggon all by himself, Foggon almost taken down, and Foggon has hit the crossbar, he scored!
That 3-2 win in Eastern Europe prompted another hero's return to Tyneside. It was the club's first trophy in 13 years. How perfectly right United had won it on Joe Harvey's 50th birthday. The silverware was back in their old skipper's familiar grasp.
Wish we were in the First Division so we could go in Europe again. This sets this crowd alight. Europe really did.
In 1971, a brash 21-year-old centre-forward came north to Tyneside. In another inspired Harvey transfer deal, the era of Supermac had arrived, and in style.
The opening Saturday of the season, we were away at Crystal Palace and we got beat 2-0. On the following Wednesday, we were at Tottenham and we drew 0-0. Things were starting to get a bit better. And then on the Saturday, we were at home to Liverpool. And it was one of the most fabulous atmospheres that I have ever experienced in my time in football, and certainly it was the best that I'd ever experienced up to that moment in time. And I remember that we got the penalty. I think it was David Young who had been taken down. We were already a goal down from an Emlyn Hughes shot, and that was the chance for me to not just break the ice, but to create the rapport with the terraces. There was a silence booming out from the terraces, and I realised as I put the ball on the spot that this was one great, glorious chance to make it with the people of Tyneside. And all of a sudden, the crowd got behind the sides, and I watched the side, the chests expand, and they became much better players, and we played some great stuff and got to a position of 3-1 up. I happened to score another couple of goals, but they were good all-round team efforts.
McDonald with the chance to make it that. There it is! And McDonald scores his second. Tudor going forward in the middle. Now McDonald, chance! Oh, what a goal! What a goal! It's a hat-trick for McDonald.
I felt that I understood then what Tyneside was all about. It needed somebody to stick the ball in the net, and it thrived on that. And of course, I in turn thrived on actually doing it for them.
Tudor, McDonald, it's in!
Howard missing that chance, couldn't quite get to it. It's McDonald who got it in.
Barrow Club going over then to take this corner, the first of the second half, and it's in, and Malcolm McDonald has done it. Intercepted by Hibbert. Martin in a bit of trouble here, expecting the whistle, I think, and Hibbert going on with it well, sending Latchford the wrong way. Good football by Hibbert. There's McDonald, and there's his goal.
Tony Green had been signed from Blackpool to supply McDonald's ammunition. His midfield brilliance was to earn him a popularity that extended far beyond the modest total of 33 league games he played before a knee injury cut short his career. United fans had hoped for rather more success than the Anglo-Italian Cup, which the team won after surviving a near right in the opening round. Terry Hibbert was in inspired mood when a brace of John Tudor goals against Roma didn't go down too well in the Italian capital.
Including the 26th-minute free kick that Malcolm McDonald headed on for John Tudor to score goal number 1 for United. Great start to the match, and there's Hibbert again, busily probing, as always. That effort flashing wide. But for sheer defensive thinking, how about this line-up to a McDonald free kick? All 11 Roma players in the 6-yards box. But their defensive tactics didn't do them much good, for in the 77th minute, McDonald fastened onto a back pass by Scarratti, and although the keeper made an attempt to reach the ball, it ran on for Tudor to hammer home Newcastle's undoubted superiority. Command of the game that might have brought them 3 goals, had Tudor's brilliant shot here not bounced to safety from the post. Roma, defensively minded from the start of the game, got few chances to shine. Newcastle well on top.
And the combination of that...
But in 1974, an uncontrollable section of the Leazes End nearly knocked the club out of the FA Cup by themselves. Newcastle had battled their way through to the 6th round, but when Nottingham Forest took a 3-1 lead at St James Park with a disputed penalty, it was just too much for some so-called fans.
And the crowd up behind there are Forest supporters, erupting. And now here come the fans. This is what they wanted to do all the time. Newcastle fans rioting out onto the pitch, a terribly dangerous moment for the players themselves now. As they charge down the field, these Newcastle supporters to where the Forest supporters are behind the other goal.
When the crowd was cleared, Newcastle turned the game around to win 4-3, but the FA declared the result void. Yet after 2 more games, Harvey's team finally overcame Forest and earned a Hillsborough semi-final against Burnley. It was to be one of the classic days in the club's history.
All the players off the field.
Burnley in the first half absolutely murdered us, and we were penned inside of our own area and found it very difficult to get out. And the second half started off quite similarly to the first. And Hillsborough had this incredible bank behind the goal that we were defending in the second half, and it was just full of black and white, just going up into the clouds, and they started to build up and get behind us, and it started really with a long ball out from Terry Hibbert that caught their defence napping, and I was able to get through. And once we got a goal ahead, then Burnley, they wilted, they crumbled, and we started to turn it on. And of course, when Newcastle did turn it on, we were something quite special.
Really springing into this game. McDonald is away. Walden is pulling him down. Still McDonald. Straight at the goalkeeper. Still McDonald. And he scored. Malcolm McDonald. Super Mac has scored. To Newton, dinked in once more. Fletcher is in there. Moncur won that well in the air. Tudor got it away to Hibbert. McDonald is on ahead. What a ball there by Hibbert. And away goes McDonald again. And that's a magnificent goal. That is number 2. And that is the killer goal. That was the ball by Hibbert. And that was a magnificent ball. MacDonald doing the rest superbly.
Not only a great victory, but achieved in great style. A display that reflected the manager's unique character.
I think the best way I can explain Joe was after we had beaten Burnley in the 1974 semi-final at Hillsborough. The agent that was handling the press agent, he sat down with Joe on the bus going back to Newcastle, and he said, "Right, Joe," he said, "I'd like to get your opinion on all the players." He said, "Tell me about Jimmy Smith. He's a bloody good player. Tell me about Malcolm McDonald. He's a bloody good player. Tell me about Terry Hibbett. He's a bloody good player." And that was basically Joe's philosophy. Put as many bloody good players into the 11 as you possibly can. And if you might not win things, but by heavens, you're going to create a very entertaining time for all the supporters. And we might not have won things, but I think that we were one of the most entertaining sides in the country at that time. There were games where we could be awful, absolutely awful, and then for some unknown reason, the very next game we would be so good that we were virtually untouchable, and we were just as likely to lose 5-0 as win 5-0. But I think some of the football that was played during those 4 or 5 years was tremendous, and it was all down to Joe enthusing about good players and saying to good players, be better, go out and do all the things that you know you're good at.
Yet on the big day itself, they did just the opposite. It was a total disaster.
And that's it! A backheader there by Toshak now.
I think it was probably some of the worst football that's been played in any cup final in this century. The first half was abysmal, and I remember coming off at half-time and saying to Frank Clark, and we were still at 0-0, amazingly. Liverpool had been almost as bad as we were, and I said to Frank, we've got to win this game because there is no way that we can play as bad in the second half as we did in the first. And this was the ridiculous thing about Newcastle. We actually went out the second half, and it was the worst 45 minutes of football that Newcastle had ever played in the time that I was there. And I don't think Liverpool played that well, but they finished up taking us 3-0, and yet on the following Monday when we came back to Newcastle, the whole of the town was alive. There were 500,000 people in the streets, you know, and they were all singing our praises, and yet it would have been the worst 90 minutes of football that I'd ever had in the black and white shirt.
The fluctuations of that Wembley campaign were mirrored the following season. But when Newcastle were up, they really were.
On his right. That's about 5 men up. Right there! Buttercup. MacDonald. This is 5 surely.
The fans' only taste of success came in the Texaco Cup, a somewhat less than 4-star competition which the club won for the second year, overtaking Southampton, who held a single-goal advantage from the first leg.
Blythe, but more upwards than forwards. Tudor's header. Bruce. Burns. Always a possibility that Newcastle will be able to catch Southampton stretched in these situations. Tudor. Pulled across and Cannell!
The real prizes, though, were still at arm's length, but there was always the consolation of the striking power of MacDonald and John Tudor.
It's there! Tudor!
Kennedy, the man who started the goal rush, to take it. And it's a goal! Tudor has scored. And Kennedy. MacDonald, it's there! Burns. Tudor, and he's done it! Number 7, Burns. MacDonald, 2-0!
At the end of the 1975 season, Joe Harvey finally called it a day after 13 years in charge. If Harvey was one of United's best-loved managers, his successor was surely one of its most controversial.
Tudor, once again, showing himself the supreme...
And I believe that as the manager, I have a duty to give them sweat, to give them blood, and to be quite honest, I would die for the club that I work for. And the very least I expect from all the players is the same. And that I expect all the players, whether they be whatever club I work for, to give everything the same. And that only the players that will give 100% will satisfy me, you know, and if they give 99%, then they will find me a hard man.
Gordon Lee may have won promotions with Port Vale and Blackburn, but by Tyneside standards, he was too much of an unknown. Lee might have lacked Harvey's unique style, but the hostile feelings his time at the helm aroused among many supporters have often masked the fact that his first season produced some spectacular performances.
Players being beaten by the wind so often, ball was blown away from them. Now Kennedy. And somebody surely, yes, Gowling. Once again, Cassidy with the throw. Gowling, it's a goal! What a lovely goal and another great start. MacDonald joining the ball. No, not MacDonald, Cassidy. And it's the third goal, fourth goal. And that a beautiful header by Nolte, moving in, we think, quickly taken by Burns to MacDonald. Gowling,
in 1976, Newcastle had Wembley in their sights again, this time with the League Cup. In the semi-final against Tottenham, it was Gowling who cancelled out Spurs' first-leg lead.
Gowling races onto a ball, rounds Pat Jennings and side-foots it into the net. A superb move. Newcastle started the second half as they had the first on the attack. Here, Nolte forces McAllister to concede a corner. And from the flag kick, Glenn Keeley jumps high and heads Newcastle into the lead for the first time on aggregate. This is the third goal, slack marking by Spurs as Cassidy slots the ball through superbly to Nolte, who's plenty of time to score.
There was to be no Wembley humiliation this time, but no silverware either. A far better performance than against Liverpool, despite key injuries. But Manchester City still had the edge.
Yes, it's there by Peter Barnes. Played now for MacDonald, onto the right foot. Gowling is there. Got Barnes outside him. Donaghy prepared, though, to float it in towards Tommy Booth. Oh, and what a goal!
An honourable defeat, and yet another tumultuous welcome home. The fans were still in a league of their own. The new manager had given them their share of entertainment. But before the new season started, Gordon Lee made the one decision for which he'll never be forgiven. It was seen as the ultimate treachery. He sold Supermac. In typically unpredictable Newcastle style, though, the team never looked back. Lee and his side, with no stars, had rocketed to third place in the First Division.
Good one! He's done it! 2-2! Oh, what a goal!
Then, just as unexpectedly as he'd arrived, Gordon Lee bailed out. He quit for Everton, leaving behind complete turmoil.
There were a lot of people that may dislike me. And I think perhaps the people that do dislike me are the people that, if I say things which I believe to be right, then it might hurt people. But likewise, it comes back to me, and that. But I think that in any football club, there's got to be a certain amount of unity. And whilst we did have our differences of opinion in the boardroom, we had them in the playing with the players as well. But by and large, you know, in their way, they love the club, and I'm quite sure everybody else loves the club. And I only hope that the future's good for them.
It was the players themselves who took the lead in who should succeed Lee.
Local lads who've probably been at Newcastle United the longest. We're a little bit upset.
They threatened a walkout unless the job went to a former school teacher and coach, Richard Dinnis. Player power eventually ruled after a sorry episode that did nobody's image any credit. But the team carried on Lee's work as Dinnis took Newcastle to 5th in the league and back into Europe with the UEFA Cup. In August 1977, Dinnis's team kicked off the new season in encouraging fashion against Leeds United.
Oh, a great one and a goal! And it's scored by Mickey Burns. Teed up. Craig, now Kennedy. That's the second goal! It's James Park Raw at the last minute, trying to snatch the winning goal.
But that victory was followed by 10 successive defeats. And when the European bubble burst, Richard Dinnis too was on his way out. The board made sure the players would be put firmly in their place this time. They sent for a hard man in Bill McGarry, a former Wolves manager with an uncompromising reputation. It was hardly a choice to capture the disenchanted fans' imagination. But even McGarry's tough line could do nothing about United's headlong plummet back into the second division. It was even a season that marked the passing of the Lees' End, the favourite haunt of generations of diehards. Morale was rock bottom.
The ball pushed out.
McGarry's rebuilding process saw him bulldoze his way through the existing squad and relay a completely new foundation. By far his most successful deal saw Peter Withe move north from Nottingham Forest for £200,000. It was a number 9 signing any United manager could boast about, as the extrovert, wholehearted Scouser proved a real crowd pleaser.
That was a clever one. Hooping it away. Oh, and now a chance for Withe. He scored it.
Chance for the shot, perhaps. Withe! Resumes now with Hibbett.
Withe, and that's a goal from Peter Withe.
This is Peter Withe. There's a chance here if he can get his shot in. And that's number 4. And Peter Withe puts the lid on it for Newcastle. Not all McGarry's signings were so successful, but equally popular was Alan Shoulder, signed from Northern League Cup fighters Blythe Spartans. A former pit worker, he soon hit a rich seam of form, digging out the chances alongside Withe. Newcastle United get the second half underway just as they got the first. Hibbett with the corner. Bohm deep at the back of the box. Withe. Well, that one's going to fall for Hibbett, will it? Yes, he wins that tackle well. Martin still. Yes, Shoulder! It's aimed towards Shoulder. Shoulder with a chance to lob. Oh, that's superbly done by Alan Shoulder. By McGarry's third season in charge, he looked to have got it right. When they beat Orient in January 1980, they were top of the table and heading towards promotion.
It's there! At last, the breakthrough!
John Connolly gets the second.
But Newcastle collapsed in the most dramatic fashion, winning just one game in the last 16.
Poskett, Blissett.
And to make the disillusionment worse, Sunderland pinched a First Division return.
A disaster for him, a disaster for Newcastle. But really they've only themselves to blame for the way they opened up for Watford then.
McGarry didn't even survive the first month of the new season. When his team crashed 4-0 at Bolton, it created club history. United were in their worst ever league position, bottom of the Second Division. By the end of August, the hard man had been axed himself. While Tyneside debated whether Clough, McMenemy or Robson would be best for the job, the board moved for another man with North East connections. But Chesterfield's Arthur Cox was not the name on every fan's shortlist. He'd been Sunderland's coach when they won the Cup in '73, and he certainly seemed to know the region's taste in signings. He spent more than $200,000 on Mick Harford from Luton, who went on to prove a far more impressive goalscorer than United fans ever really saw. But far more of a hit in that daunting number 9 shirt was Everton's Imre Varadi. The pacey, live-wire striker hit 20 in his first season.
The mistake by Bolton, and Varadi was straight in there.
The real emerging talent, though, came from the comparative backwater of Towlaw Town. Chris Waddle was a former sausage seasoner who looked an ambling, almost shambling figure. But could he play?
Here goes Waddle, he's still got it. Good effort, Waddle again, just wide. Trying to get it back for Newcastle. Martin was there with a little touch. Keegan, Waddle, he scored. That's the goal Chris Waddle wanted on his return to the team.
There was rebuilding off the field too. As the Lord Westwood era came to an end, Stan Seymour Jr. took over in the boardroom. The new chairman was to show so much of his father's appetite for success. But it's doubtful if Seymour Sr. could have coped with the idea of a rock concert at St James Park. The Rolling Stones packed the terraces as the club showed its forward thinking in the new commercial world of football. Mind you, even Mick Jagger and the Stones would have taken second billing to the next superstar to come to Tyneside.
This deal had to come off, you know, because we were driving up, Laurie Mack and myself, to London to fly to Utrecht, and we saw 2 magpies on the side of the road, and he said, there's a sign, you know. Even he was starting to believe it in the end, you know.
Arthur Cox might have been building quietly for the future, but in August 1982, all hell broke loose when he shocked the game by signing Kevin Keegan, twice European Footballer of the Year. It was a breathtaking move, outrageous, sensational, and United's success-starved fans revelled in every moment of it.
Craggs forward, Keegan's flick, Varadi, Keegan again, chance here for Keegan. He's done it! Kevin Keegan scores, and St James's Park goes absolutely wild. 15 minutes gone, and Kevin Keegan celebrates his debut with the goal the whole of Tyneside has been praying for. The flick by Keegan first of all, the return ball from Varadi, and from that moment on there was only one result. He kept his cool, Hucker came out, and he tucked that one away without any bother at all. He's still being mobbed down there. He scored on his
If the news of Keegan's signing had reverberated from Hamburg to Liverpool, then the uproar the former England captain created almost echoed as far. But Arthur Cox didn't sit back on his coup. He brought Terry McDermott back from Liverpool for his second spell at United. And he signed the tenacious Northern Ireland international, David McCreery.
I think, to me, I can only sum Arthur up as a military-type man, but he knows when to put his arm around you and when to hit you kick up the backside. And for me, he was fabulous. You know, I came in at a time where I was out in America, and he says we're going somewhere, and I believed him.
in the middle.
Keegan's mere presence revitalised the club, but it was still obvious more players would have to be brought in alongside the great man. When Cox started the 83-84 season by selling Varadi, the fans were baffled. But there were to be no complaints when his replacement arrived.
Waddle in towards Keegan, that's the sort of ball he loves. What a good little glancing header to Beardsley, who's got control and scores.
I wanted Peter Beardsley.
And I wanted Peter Beardsley because I'd stalked him for a long time. I don't think there's a limit to really what he can achieve, because he's got that unknown quality that sometimes he doesn't even know what he's going to do, so defenders don't know what he's going to do. He's got the ability to score goals, he's got the ability to make goals. I think the sky's the limit for him.
And this is Beardsley chasing. He's got away from his marker. Slipped it through. Waddle, fine save. Beardsley. He never stopped running, Peter Beardsley, and he got his reward. Waddle now. It's a fine ball through for Beardsley. Could this be the hat-trick? What a superb 3 goals from Peter Beardsley. Every one a gem. It may have been the second division, but the team produced a quality of play rarely matched at any stage in the club's history. Chris Waddle was just one of the players blossoming under the Cox-Keegan influence. The defence had been bolstered by the arrival from QPR of a stylish sweeper who was to breathe the United cause.
Glenn Roeder, you know, I think was the final piece in the jigsaw. I think the first year we ended up, I think, was it 4th or 5th? And then really 84 was the year that everything happened. You know, I can remember the crowd. We were playing Manchester City. We won 5-0 at home. And the games like that, everyone expected you to win week in, week out. And to go out there as a player, you knew that once we were going to score goals, but maybe we could concede a few, but we were definitely going to score goals.
It was a great time to be a Newcastle fan, all right. Keegan scores and makes it look so simple. 1-0. Kick hit deep. Beardsley's made the run and picked it up. Keegan bursting through. Waddle. What a neat move. Finished off so crisply there by Chris Waddle. 2-0. So Alan Shoulder with this penalty. And Carr saved it, and Poskett, and Carr saved it again. A marvellous double save that from Kevin Carr. Well, may the crowd applaud. But now it's Waddle breaking for Newcastle. McDermott, Keegan, this is a good move developing. And McDermott again, Beardsley. Keegan's there, and Keegan has scored. That's quite remarkable. Straight from the penalty save, Keegan's made it 3-0. Waiting for someone to make themselves available. It's Kenny Wharton who's making the overlap. Beardsley, still Beardsley, and Peter Beardsley makes it 4-0 to Newcastle with no problems. John Anderson having weight to the attack. Keegan's done with it, and Beardsley, what a positive finish from Peter Beardsley. It's 5-0 now to Newcastle.
This is what? For McDermott. Keegan's gone to the near post. Keegan! Beardsley. Beardsley again. Brilliant goal! Well, that's a marvellous goal by Beardsley. Waddle. Glorious flick in from Keegan. Now McDermott. It's McCreary in there. Didn't fall for him, but it might now for Truitt. Now for Keegan. Brilliant save. Out goes Wharton. McDermott. And then for Waddle. With time to set himself up for the shot. McDermott. Beardsley for Keegan. Now Truitt arriving. Waddle's in the middle. And Keegan!
When Malcolm MacDonald returned as manager of an impressive Fulham side, even Supermac had to acknowledge the new generation of Tyneside heroes. Now Waddle trying to work the opening. Wharton's knocked back. Keegan, what a finish from Kevin Keegan. He absolutely buried that one. Oh, beautifully brought down from Keegan. And a touch through for Mills. And Mills, the substitute, has got the equaliser. Only minutes left. 2-2. Mills now. Well into injury time. Beardsley's still going, trying to get the ball in the middle. And Wharton's there. And Wharton has scored. It's 3-2 to Newcastle. The Keegan investment finally paid the ultimate dividend on the last day of the 83-84 season against Brighton, Keegan's last league game before retiring. John Anderson looking for Keegan. He's got a touch now. And Waddle has hit the post, and Kevin Keegan scores, and his career on Tyneside turns full circle. He scored on his debut, and now in his final game he's provided the goal the fans were praying for. Jimmy Case. Young with the flick. Roeder couldn't cut it out, and here's Ryan. And Jerry Ryan has equalised. It's 1-1. Keegan. Truick. Jones the defender. Dermot out to Keegan again. He's got the cross in, and Waddle has scored. But Waddle's quick to congratulate the architect, Kevin Keegan. Beardsley's still got this one, though. Keegan through again for Beardsley. Oh, he did well there. Oh, that's brilliant from Peter Beardsley. What a way to end a season. And even Keegan congratulates the man who may well turn out to be his successor as the fans' #1. It was only fitting that Beardsley, Keegan and Waddle should complete the season's goal scoring. They'd netted 66 between them, and their firepower was the cornerstone of promotion. United only went up as third-place club, but the celebrations were of World Cup quality. Tyneside decided War Kev needed his own personal leaving party. Only Liverpool would do for such an occasion, as Keegan's career turned back to where the real success had started. 36,000 saw a 2-2 draw, but the effect Special K had on the city of Newcastle upon Tyne seemed to touch everyone. Keegan had been an inspiration, an international quality talent with a fanatic's commitment. A grafting superstar who'd given the fans the glory they'd yearned for. His departure was stage managed with a touch of Hollywood. The fireworks, a helicopter, a unique Newcastle experience. Manager Arthur Cox had showed a daring and initiative unequalled by most so-called big-name bosses, but the public side of a deeply committed man was not always easy to understand. Unbelievably, though, within weeks of leading United into the First Division, Cox made a startling announcement.
I resigned. I don't like the word quit because I've never quit anything in my life. I resigned on a matter of principle.
What was that matter of principle, Arthur? It was stated in the...
Well, I felt that the board had not appreciated what had been done and had not acted in a right and proper manner, which was to negotiate the contract, possibly even as quickly as what the first contract was negotiated, which was 5 minutes.
This time, United fans got the famous figure they'd so often demanded, and they didn't come much bigger than Jack Charlton, England's World Cup hero and one of the region's most famous sons. A Geordie right down to his boots. He'd been a reliable and successful manager with Middlesbrough and Sheffield Wednesday, though not exactly flamboyant. Big Jack kept Newcastle solid, consolidating well in mid-table, and there was always Beardsley and Waddle to watch.
Morris gets back to get it away, and it's in the strike. Waddle's got it. In the air from Wharton. Disconcerted Moran. And Beardsley. A clinical finish.
Transfers dominated at this time, but much to the fans' bitter resentment, the Stars were leaving. Charlton sold Waddle to Spurs, and when the crowd turned on Jack, he followed him out the door.
If I've done it wrong, I'm sorry. I think I did it right. I think time will show that I did it right.
But if you had been doing it right, surely you should have stayed on to prove the way you were doing things was right.
Because there's a split. There's a split at Newcastle now, and that split will be there a long time. And if it happened again, I don't need it. You know, I thought I was wanted here. When I found out I wasn't, I told him when I came, you know, the day you don't want me, tell me, and I'll leave. And I did.
If loyalty to the cause is a major requirement for management, then Charlton's successor was the most qualified candidate in the club's history. Willie McFall brought back memories of the Fairs Cup glories in much the same way Joe Harvey had revived Wembley emotions.
Marsh's deep cross, Bell! However did McFall get to that one? Bell's header, and again McFall meets it.
The popular Ulsterman had topped 350 games, and the coach's easier approach soon brought the best out of the squad. His appointment at first temporary was soon confirmed. The team seemed ready to take off, especially when Peter Beardsley became Newcastle's first England international since Malcolm MacDonald. But the former Carlisle striker would also follow the road out of Newcastle. McFall couldn't keep him, the lure of champions Liverpool irresistible. It was another 1.9 million in the bank and another gaping hole out on the pitch. If the local production line was drying up a little, McFall showed he was bold enough to cast his net further afield, a lot further. No English club had gone to Brazil before, but the love of a big signing was in the blood. Enter Mirandinha, an international from Palmeiras, whose passport was about to get a Geordie visa. On September the 1st, 1987, Mirandinha made his debut at Norwich. It was 3 games before his electric pace turned to goals in the magnificent setting of Old Trafford. In Paul Goddard, the Brazilian had a striking partner whose consistently high level of performance earned him more popularity than his respectable haul of goals. But the crowd's favourite by now was Paul Gascoigne. If Gazza hadn't been wearing the black and white shirt, then he would have certainly been standing on the terraces alongside the thousands who adored him. A product of the club's victorious youth team, he was cheeky, he was a bit chubby, and he was brilliant. Newcastle's ultimate local hero. Tyneside seemed the perfect stage for him to perform his brilliant repertoire.
I think it's more to do with the manager and the coach and the players encouraging all the time. I don't think anywhere else in the country where players, all the ones are giving the young players encouragement like they do to me, and it's really showed in the last couple of months.
Newcastle finished the season strongly. Only 2 defeats in the last 11 games promised well for more progress. But for the third season running, the fans' ambitions were left doubled up by another transfer body blow. This time it was their beloved Gaza, the real folk hero. Months of speculation and debate ended with Paul's precocious talents travelling south to join the other emigrant, Chris Waddle, at Spurs. The £2 million that Paul picked up was no consolation to the supporters, but the money was at least reinvested. £850,000 went on Wimbledon's cup-winning captain and goalkeeper Dave Besant, as not just the new stand was under construction. Besant's Plough Lane colleague at centre-half Andy Thorne was to follow for a similar fee.
That's better, that's just a little further forward.
Another £600,000 went on Bradford City's dangerous forward John Hendry, while Hearts high-scoring striker John Robertson crossed the border to complete a multi-million quartet. Hendry's first goal for the club set United on their way to that much-prized achievement, a win at Liverpool. Mirandinha hit 2 as Middlesbrough were dispatched 3-0. But these were the only 2 wins in the opening 15 games of the 1988-89 season. The body of the team seemed to be rejecting the transplants. It proved the sad end for Willie McFall's 22-year career at St James's Park. The harsh world of football can have little time for sentiment. Newcastle's First Division collapse only fueled the off-the-field battles which raged alongside the fight for survival.
And it is a fact
the Magpie Group was formed from a powerful nucleus of wealthy local businessmen. It launched into a prolonged campaign against the board of directors. Their leader, John Hall, the multi-millionaire entrepreneur who had inspired the building of the Metro Centre shopping complex, was on collision course with Gordon McKeague, the new chairman with his own Newcastle family pedigree. It was hardly the background for a relegation battle. Queen's Park Rangers' much-respected leader Jim Smith took the reins after an embarrassingly long search for a new manager. The Bald Eagle had a wheeler-dealer reputation and certainly lived up to it. The changes were almost daily, as Newcastle at one time contrived to trust their fortunes to a Brazilian-Danish striking force.
And Mirandinha has scored! A sensational start for Newcastle! 3 minutes gone and Mirandinha does it! Robillard beaten!
Brock with the corner kick.
It's got in, and it's Pingle!
A 2-2 draw against Liverpool gave some hope, but even Smith's wholesale changes couldn't save a catastrophic dive back into Division 2.
He's delighted, and they'll love that back in Denmark watching this match.
There was an ugly mood around the club. The fans spent the summer being urged to boycott home games. Smith responded with a masterful double signing. Mick Quinn came from Portsmouth and Scottish international Mark McGee returned for his second spell on Tyneside. It looked an impressive pairing in July. On the first football Saturday in August, the fans who were persuaded to stay away missed one of the club's great debuts. Mickey Quinn hit 4 against Leeds. Famous number 9 shirt had done it again, and it fitted the irrepressible Scouser to perfection. Quinn was only half the double act. Mark McGee was stamping his own hallmark on some pulsating United performances. But the Scottish international's real speciality was the spectacular last-minute winner. Past one man, the other defenders just ignored. The perfect finish. Amazing, astonishing, unbelievable, all those and more. Jim Smith hoped Scotland's World Cup captain Roy Aitken, a £500,000 signing from Celtic, would be the final brick in his total reconstruction. United looked ready to lift off again. St James Park boasted the magnificent new Milburn stand, a fitting tribute to the legendary war Jackie. Even the long-standing power struggle at the club had ended in compromise, millionaire John Hall adding his entrepreneurial talents to an ambitious, forward-looking boardroom. But an instant return to the first was to be denied in an astonishing climax to the season that centred on a private North East sideshow. United could still clinch automatic promotion when they travelled the short distance to rivals Middlesbrough. A defeat for Middlesbrough would have sent them crashing from first to third in successive seasons, but never predict a North East derby.
First time effort, and it's loose, and Slaven wraps it up for Middlesbrough.
Back at St James Park, a giant screen relayed the agonies of a crushing 4-1 defeat. The Borough had saved their second division lives, but in the process had sentenced United to the playoffs. An amazing 14,000 fans had watched the TV horror show, another astonishing testimony to the fanatical Tyneside support. The dejected crowds trooped away, knowing their team had finished 6 points clear in third, but still had to face a two-leg semi-final that turned into their worst nightmare. It was to be the old enemy Sunderland who, after a goalless first encounter, crossed the Tyne and snatched their place in the first ever playoff final at Wembley. The ultimate irony came when Sunderland eventually lost to Swindon Town, but still won promotion after the Wiltshire club had been controversially demoted for making illegal payments. It could only happen on Tyneside. But whatever the fortunes have been for Newcastle United, the club has always reflected the very heart of a proud and resilient city. The northeast of England has always considered itself the hotbed of soccer. Football's fiery passions will always burn fiercely on the terraces of St James Park, thanks to the devoted fans of a very special club, Newcastle United.